Welcome to the Resilient Professional Podcast. Sean here. Well, at the time of the recording of this podcast, it's January. And of course, very common in January are New Year's resolutions. So I'm not a big believer in New Year's resolutions, but I am a big believer in good strategy. So for this podcast, we're going to talk about some very, very easy to integrate strategies that you can use to improve your dietary practices, to give you more energy, to lose a bit of weight, and just to feel better about yourself. So I'd encourage you to take a listen to this podcast. You'll get some, like I said, very actionable ideas around diet and nutrition that will help you to become a more energetic and resilient professional. Welcome to the Resilient Professional Podcast. Professional success really is a game of inches. You have the experience and knowledge, but you realize that professional success is more than just knowledge and experience. It's actually applying what you already know. It's about consistently applying what you know in spite of the challenges that are sure to come your way. You know, Olympians know how to battle adversity and to perform at their best, even in the midst of setbacks and frustrations. I think we can learn a lot from the Olympian mindset. It really is about the cultivation of resiliency. Physical resiliency, emotional resiliency, relational resiliency, cognitive resiliency, resiliency in each aspect of our lives. On a regular basis, we'll unpack these ideas through guest speakers and podcast material that will take you to the next level of professional success. Well, in this edition of the Resilient Professional Podcast, we're going to talk about diet. And diet can be a very controversial topic. We come to the table literally with cultural influences and our family influences and, comfort foods that we have preferences for. So a diet obviously is supercharged with all kinds of things other than what it's intended for, which is to fuel our bodies so we can do things professionally and in our personal lives. So what I thought I'd do is I would tackle this topic just because as we're producing this podcast, we're coming into the new year. So we've gotten through 2015. And of course, one of the most popular New Year's resolutions out there is diet related. I want to lose some weight. So I want to provide you with a common sense overview on a few different strategies or pointers when it comes to diet. And my hope is that you can integrate it into your dietary practices, or at least some of the ideas you think might be applicable to your situation for 2016. And so here it goes. Let's go through some common sense ideas. Now, the first idea is to be a little bit mindful. So be mindful when you're eating. Stop just putting stuff in your mouth without thinking. Many of us go through the day totally unconscious of what we put in our bodies. You wouldn't do this with medications, at least I don't think you would. And why do we think it's any different than food? Food, sometimes we refer to as food as medicine. And food is a very important part of our daily experience. And we should be a little bit intentional around how we're eating rather than just wolfing down mindlessly the food that we're reaching for. So stop doing this. Just take a step back and realize that what you put in your mouth really does matter. In that moment, you may not think it does, but all those little moments added up over a day, a week, a month, a lifetime can actually lead to health disaster if they're not handled properly. So that's the first tip is make sure that you be mindful around your dietary practices. Now, the second tip is don't skip breakfast or lunch. Maybe you're one of those people who just wakes up in the morning and you're just not hungry. Maybe you get preoccupied and you unintentionally skip meals. But then around 3 p.m., you're just ravenous. And often when that happens, people just kind of reach for whatever's in sight. They don't have as much discipline at that point. So by not eating through the day, you set yourself up for making often very poor food decisions later on in the day. So it just makes good sense to eat most of your calories during the first part of the day, so through that breakfast and then lunch period, because that's the time of the day when you're most metabolically active and when you're going to use most of the calories. So for most people, that's not from 6 p.m. to 1 a.m., which is often when people eat that junk food or that stuff that's not as healthy for us or overeat. It's usually between 7 a.m. and 6 p.m. That's sort of our metabolically active window, and that's when most of your calories should be taken in. And ideally, it should be principally your breakfast and your lunch, which would be most of your calories, and you'd eat a light dinner. So when you get up and you've completed your morning routines, make sure that you allow enough time to have that healthy and filling breakfast. So again, a lot of times why people skip breakfast is they're rushed and they'll reach for a muffin or something convenient, but again, it may not be the best food choice. In fact, your breakfast should be the most calorie-dense meal of the day. So stop eating cereals, or reduce them at least, and add the following kinds of items to your breakfast options. So it could be unflavored Greek yogurt with some blueberries, maybe some cottage cheese with grapefruit cubes, including the juice. How about some eggs, poached or boiled or fried? Eggs are just a perfect food or protein. Cooked bacon with high-quality local meat sources. Free-range pigs are a great option for that kind of food source. Or it could be toasted sourdough with sprouted grain bread. Spread ghee on the toast, or organic butter produced from grass-fed dairy herds. Other spreads could include organic almond butter or sesame seed butter. So the takeaway on this particular tip is make sure you start having your breakfast. It's when you're most metabolically active. And by being full and satisfied through those periods, you'll be less likely to make poor food decisions later in the day when you haven't been taking in sufficient calories. Now let's talk about lunch. The next biggest meal of the day would likely be your lunch, at least it should be. So if you want to keep your energy levels high and cultivate mental alertness, then focus on things like salads with some protein. You don't have to be a chef to create some great salads. It's such a simple way of creating food and a meal source. So get some romaine lettuce, dice a few peppers, cucumbers, tomatoes, maybe throw in some olives for healthy fat, a few grated carrots, and you can add some additional flavor by sprinkling in some feta cheese. You can sprinkle in a little bit of dressing. I like to keep it really simple. Tablespoon of olive oil, 1 to 2 tablespoons of balsamic vinegar, and I'll often add to this some sea salt, maybe some pepper, a little garlic powder. It's delicious. And on top of the salad, I'll usually add some maybe salmon, tuna, chicken. I'll often exchange those sources for sardines. I don't do that in the work context. Everyone seems to complain about the smell, but I sneak in the odd can of sardines when I'm at home. But even there, I have to be a little bit careful when I do it. And then dinner really from a calorie standpoint should be the lightest, lowest calorie meal of the day. You really don't need a lot of calories at that point because, again, you're kind of beginning to wind down and you'll be less metabolically active. You look at a lot of people that struggle with weight gain, it's often because they're fueling their body with a lot of calories at the point in the day when they really just don't need them. So all you need really is a small tossed salad, maybe some steamed veggies, sprinkled with a little bit of lemon juice, some sea salt. And if you need to stay mentally alert in the evening because of work commitments or board meetings or other engagements, then you'll want to add a small amount of protein to that salad. Well, how about snacks? I try to stay away from snacking, but if I have a long day, I'll often pack a little bit of snack food. And so I'll prepare some light snacks. Two of my favorite options include sliced apples with a few small cubes of cheddar cheese, or a handful of almonds mixed with some dried cranberries. The other thing is don't drink and dine. So I'm not talking necessarily about alcohol here, but really what I'm talking about is refrain from taking on extra liquid calories just before you eat. It really does interfere with digestion, so you don't really need it. And between meals, feel free to sip on some lemon water to fuel up with your favorite hydration beverage. But in general, strive to drink 6 to 8 cups a day, more often if you're active, but try to refrain from drinking very much liquids with a meal. So I've got a tip for you as it relates to going to the grocery store, and that tip is stay on the sidelines. So, a healthy diet begins not in your kitchen area. Really, a healthy diet begins when you're at the grocery store. And probably many of you have heard this tip, but when you're in the grocery store, stay out of the middle aisles as much as possible. And for the most part, there's nothing there that really is consistent with a healthy diet. So when you focus on a healthy diet and you're in the outside aisles, your focus should be on whole foods, fruit, vegetables, organic meat products from trusted food sources. And those food sources are usually on the perimeter around the outside of the store. So generally, if it comes in a box and is processed with food labels and they use words that you just can't pronounce, that's a bit of a red flag. Better maybe think twice before you put that stuff in your shopping cart. And when possible, buy local. And start getting comfortable with farmers markets. This may not be an option for you at certain times of the year, depending on where you live. However, when it's possible, be sure to build regular visits to the farmers markets into your schedule so you can get that high-quality local food source. Okay, the next point is choose wisely. And what I mean by that is get rid of the notion that eating fat makes you fat, which seems to be a fairly common notion still in the culture. It's really what your body does with food once it's in your body that makes you fat, not necessarily the food source being fat. Now, we have to be careful around fat because it's so calorically dense. It's easy to take in too many calories. But just by eating fat, that's not going to be the main reason you're going to gain body weight. So when you ingest fat and you do it in moderation and you eat healthy fat sources, that can actually make you more healthy. Healthy fats come from organic butters and dairy products, fish oils, avocados, olive oil, coconut oil. You want to make sure you're introducing these healthy fats into your diet. When trading calories between protein, fats, and carbohydrates, reduce portion sizes accordingly. So keep in mind that 1 gram of fat has 9 calories and 1 gram of carbohydrates or protein has about 4 calories. Here's another tip. Introduce fermented foods into your diet. So what are fermented foods? We'll talk about that in a second, but be sure to integrate some fermented foods. They really help with your gut health, and all you have to do is Google gut health and why it's important, and you'll understand that this is a critical area to overall health. It impacts your immune system, your overall energy, and a host of other processes in your body. So examples of fermented foods could include sauerkraut, yogurt, kefir, pickle, sourdough bread, and fermented drinks like kombucha. Kefir is almost a miracle food. And there's 2 kinds of fermented foods. So there's fermented foods that actually include the good sources of bacteria, so that the cultures, the communities of bacteria. Kefir would be a good example of that. And then there are foods that feed that bacteria, and yogurt would be an example of that kind of food source. So if you're not introducing fermented foods into your diet, I'd really recommend you seriously consider it. Experiment for a while, see if it improves your health. Next point is consider juicing with veggies. You know, it's next to impossible to ingest the amount of greens that you probably need for optimal health. So one of the ways that you can integrate more healthy green food sources is by injecting a little bit of juicing into your schedule through the week. Now, it may not be every day, but maybe a couple of times a week you'd start introducing this dietary practice. We invested a couple of years ago in a great juicing machine, and I think it's just a very nourishing, satisfying drink, a nice green smoothie, or using a juicing machine to get the pure juice. And it's something you may want to experiment with as another way of getting great food sources into your body. The next tip is routines are okay. So I'm not against trying new recipes or being adventurous with food choices and recipes, right? We all need some variety in our life, but when it comes to healthy food choices, getting into a healthy groove is actually pretty important. And that groove, if it's consistent and regular, really helps you to make consistent progress on good nutritional practices and choices consistently day in and day out on tried and true foods that work for you and your family. So stock your pantry and fridge with food choices that you'll use on a regular basis. When you do this, it's just one less thing to think about. So you just get stocked up with all those healthy foods, so it's just an automatic part of your regular routines. As well, make a point not to stock the pantry with unhealthy food choices. So, again, it's one of those things that if you lack willpower, it's the end of the day, you've had a stressful week, it's so easy to reach for those unhealthy food choices if they're in the pantry. So over time, begin weaning yourself from having those unhealthy foods even in your home. The next point is plan ahead. So prepping your meal options in the morning when you get up is not necessarily a great practice, right? Because if you're a little bit rushed, and we all tend to be a little bit time cramped in the mornings, it doesn't always work well. So just make it a point to begin preparing your food options the previous evening. And a lot of people, I know in our family does this, is also prep your food choices and what you're going to do for the week ahead. So the more preparation you do, the greater the likelihood you're going to make good food choices through the week and each day and make great progress on your health and dietary goals. Now, this next one is maybe a little bit controversial for some of you, but it's save alcohol for special occasions. In spite of all the hype around health benefits of red wine, and you need to drink a lot of red wine to get the health benefits, the downside is, the negative consequences of excess alcohol consumption on your body. So I'd recommend saving those alcoholic beverages for the weekends or special occasions. The recommendation you hear most often is about a 4-ounce glass per day, but I doubt that most people can stick to that amount. If you can, great. Maybe having a little glass of red wine on a daily basis could work for you. As well, a glass of wine is full of empty calories. So if you make it a regular part of your dietary practice and you're not that active, it actually may lead to some weight gain, maybe additional lethargy, maybe even brain fog. So, you have to sort of weigh the pros and cons of regular alcoholic consumption. So if you want to be energetic and resilient through the whole day, consuming alcohol just isn't a great idea. There are a lot of healthier ways of winding down at the end of the day. Again, just my opinion, but it's something you want to take a look at. It gets back to that being mindful around our dietary practices. Not saying you shouldn't drink alcohol, but just make sure you integrate it in a way that promotes health and promotes ideal weight and body composition. Colors are good. The more color on your plate, the more likely your food choices for the meal are loaded up with lots of great nutrients. So if your plate looks a little bit bland, it probably means that it's comprised of bland nutrition. So get those bright reds and yellows and greens and oranges fully integrated into your plate. And that just comes from a great salad that's a mixture of wonderful vegetable varieties that are out there. How about cultivating gratefulness as the next point? Whether or not you have a religious bent, before you dig into your food, why not make a point of just being a little bit grateful for the meal? A prayer of thankfulness or just being grateful generally in our sort of internal minds reminds us all of just how fortunate we are when we have a healthy food choice or meal available to us on a daily basis. It really is a blessing. But again, most of us take it for granted because we're not being mindful around this very important blessing. So many people majority of people just plow through their food without even giving this blessing a second thought. So be mindful and thankful, and ultimately you'll be emotionally healthier and physically healthier. And the reality is mindfulness and gratefulness cultivates a slowing down, a calming of your sympathetic nervous system. And when you do that and you're more relaxed, your digestive system can function more effectively. So less stress, more gratefulness actually facilitates more effective digestion. Next tip is fasting. And many of you maybe have never fasted ever in your life. You can't conceive of such an idea. But every once in a while, it probably is a good idea to refrain from food and consider some level of fasting. The fast could be a day or two, or it could be what's referred to as an intermittent fast. For example, you could kind of carve out a 12-hour period where you may not eat at all. But it doesn't mean that you don't ingest any food at all. So, for example, you could have your breakfast when you eat in the morning. You could have a 2 p.m. lunch, maybe a later lunch, and then not eat again until breakfast the next day. And so you've given your body some rest from having to process nutrients and going through the digestive process. And that's probably a good thing for your body every once in a while. And fasting helps to really build on that appreciation and thankfulness idea that I referenced in the previous point. When you don't have food at a time when you'd like it, it really does foster appreciation for it. As well, fasts prove to us that you don't have to be captive to your body's cries for food. We do have some autonomy here. And fasts can help to give your digestive system a break and can even be used to cleanse your body. So again, consider a fast periodically, and it could be just an intermittent fast. You get up, have your breakfast, maybe have a lunch, maybe an early, very light dinner around 4 o'clock, and then don't eat anything again until you get up the next morning. The next point is stay hydrated. believe it or not, sometimes people will overeat because they mistake being dehydrated for hunger cravings. So we've talked about hydration before, and it's really important to be, again, mindful of your hydration status through the day, and begin, being intentional around trying to getting that 6 to 8 cups of water through the day to stay adequately hydrated. But when it comes to mealtime, I've already alluded to this. Try to stay away from drinking too much water. Excess water can dilute digestive juices, and it actually negatively impacts the digestive process. So just keep that in mind. The next point is relax when you're eating. Unfortunately, it's very common for people in our culture to rush through their meal times. We're just rush here, rush there, going through to convenience stores to pick up something, or fast food restaurants. And I know, I get that. We live busy lives, and rushing is kind of just part of our culture. But the problem with rushing around, and certainly rushing your mealtime and your food consumption, is that it really runs counter to effective digestion and how your body processes food. And I'm convinced that a lot of times poor health and weight gain and other health problems is linked to the fact that people are just gulping down food, they're rushing it, they're in low-grade stress, and their body's not properly getting the resources, the nutrients from the food that you're actually taking in because of that stress response. So your digestive system works best when you're relaxed. And that's when you're in what we refer to as a parasympathetic nervous system sort of orientation or response. When you're dominant in that state, it just really aids in digestion. So if you're feeling stressed and you're rushing around, you're activating the sympathetic nervous system, your fight or flight response. And when this happens, your body quickly begins to shunt blood from your stomach to the limbs to get you ready to fight or to run. So the natural consequence of that is that you have less blood in your digestive system, and you're not functioning optimally as it relates to extracting nutrients from your food. So take time to relax. Don't be gulping down food at your desk, in a 15-minute interval before you get into the next project. Go out someplace that's calming, that's relaxing, and take your time to eat your food. Don't be completely utilitarian as it relates to wolfing down calories. The next point is chew. A lot of people have just the bad habit of, again, wolfing down food without properly chewing it. And this gets in the way of proper digestion. When you chew properly, you begin to send signals to the digestive system that it needs to get ready to do its thing. As well, saliva juices that build up in your mouth play a really important role in digestion. So a lack of chewing really can hurt your nutritional absorption and how well your body absorbs those nutrients and processes them. So make sure that you're chewing thoroughly. And although the exact number of chews varies with the texture of the food and the salivary glands of the person, the food should be completely liquid and loose in its texture. So again, just make sure you chew properly. And then the final point is that everyone is unique. These are just some basic guidelines to think about. You've got unique physiology, unique circumstances, unique cultural and family patterns when it comes to your food choices and how your body responds to the various food choices and macronutrients, fats, protein, and sources of carbohydrates that you take in through the day. So it's going to be really important that you experiment over time to find out which food sources and choices and patterns work best for you. But hopefully these tips will give you some starting points that you can introduce into your dietary practices. And like I said, some of these points are not related directly to the specific foods that you ingest. It's related to the environment and the stress response. It's tied to the emotion we bring to the food choices, and it's tied to the degree of mindfulness around those food choices. So again, all the best in cultivating professional resiliency. Hope you enjoyed this podcast. Well, that concludes this edition of the Resilient Professional Podcast. Hope you enjoyed the tips and strategies we shared. I'd really encourage you to take maybe one or two of those strategies and integrate them into your life over the next maybe month or 2 months to see whether it makes a difference to your health, your energy, maybe getting you to a more ideal weight. Maybe it's just being grateful, a little more mindful about your food choices. Maybe when you eat in an environment of calm and and relative tranquility. Maybe it's introducing cultured foods, foods that would be, kefir or yogurt or other foods that might be good for your gut health. Anyway, if you want more information about being a resilient professional, whether it's dietary practices, more creativity, more effective goal setting, then make sure you download the Resilient Professional ebook at the Take Charge of Change website at www.takechargeofchange.com. You take care. Be resilient.